it did sort of fit, kind of fit with the mood somehow. I don't know why. It just was kind of cosmic, I guess.
That's Matthew Sweet talking about his new album, Catspaw. I'm Jamie Green, and this is Trading Floors.
I'm going to Kansas City, here I come. Oh, yeah.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to another edition of Trading Floors. I'm your host, Jamie Green, and got a question for you. Who was the most famous alumni of your high school? Who was like the person who did the best that people talked about? Well, for my high school, it certainly isn't me, right? Because I'm just a schmo with the podcast. But there's a couple people. But the one person that I've always wanted to talk to and get a chance to hang out a little bit with is the amazing Matthew Sweet. So Matthew graduated from the same high school I did. He literally graduated in May of 83, and I showed up in August of 83. So we just missed each other, but Lincoln is a college town where lots of people know each other. So I was very much aware of Matthew. My siblings went to high school with some of his siblings. We went to the same church growing up. So it's always been a dream of mine to get a chance to talk to Matthew about his amazing, prolific career, all the great songs he's written, all the collaborations he's done. So I reached out, and his management said absolutely, and we got to talk. And it's one of those things where we could have talked for hours. Probably a little too much inside baseball for some people, unless you're also from Lincoln. But Matthew's really cool and has done so many great things, and just a sweet guy. So you're really going to dig this. We really had a lot of fun. So let's get started. Here's my conversation with Matthew Sweet. Well, Matthew, thanks so much for being on Trading Floors. This is going to be the last episode of the year for me, and I know Catspaw came out at the beginning of the year, and I really dug the album. And it kind of fit. It kind of fit the mood, though, right? I mean, we're still in crazy times, so I'm asking everybody this because I'm. How are you holding up?
I'm doing well. You know, it's funny. I've had this conversation even very recently. I'm trying to remember who it was with, where, like, for me, I've always been a homebody. I've never been, super social in terms of, having tons of friends and going out and doing stuff. I'm really kind of, a loner in that sense, other than my wife, and we hang out, all the time. And so I kind of felt like, it doesn't change that much for me.
Yeah.
Other than, we couldn't tour, and I got in, kind of worse shape physically and stuff.
Oh my God.
It hasn't.
You're preaching to the choir, bud.
Yeah.
I did the COVID 30.
It hasn't. Oh yeah, I know. It's, but it hasn't, changed my life that much. I think we were double vaccinated with the Pfizer in the spring, and we're pretty sure we got a breakthrough infection in early July. It was really nasty kind of thing I'd never felt before, but I didn't get tested. But I spent about a week with a fever over 100, like an entire, it was like 8 days straight. And just terrible joint aches and body aches and fatigue, but it didn't get in my lungs. So I'm happy about that. And I guess I have to credit the vaccination. And now we've had our boosters and our flu shots and everything. But other than being careful about that and, touring not being happening, and it's a little bit, I'm kind of like maybe far from going out and touring. It could be later next year. But so the touring thing's weird, because it's really how I primarily make my living. I mean, I have, I get some publishing stuff a couple times a year, but not quite enough, to get by on, but my wife has a job. And so, in those ways, it's weird time for musicians, but I feel like at least I'm free to make music. And I felt happy that I actually had something finished at the beginning of the pandemic, and that we were able to get Omnivore to put it out in such a timely fashion, even though it was, a year old. And yeah, strangely, even though it wasn't born of the pandemic, it did sort of kind of fit with the mood somehow. I don't know why. It just was kind of cosmic, I guess.
Yeah.
But I guess I've kind of answered your question.
You totally did.
I've consumed incredible amounts of content, just watched
what are you
million
watching?
hours of shows and things, just everything. I watched, for instance, like I'm a big fan of the original 60s Star Trek.
Oh, yeah.
I watched every episode of every version of Star Trek that was ever made,
That's where Catspaw came from, right?
That is where Catspaw. Well, yeah. I actually saw it someone say it it was a show. I want to say like maybe like the White Queen or one of those shows about sort of royalty, British royalty kind of history.
Mm-hmm.
And someone used the term Catspaw. And I already, knew that word because of Star Trek, but I wasn't exactly sure what it meant. And it really is, the main meaning it has is, someone who does the bidding of another, like, he was a cat's paw for the king or something like that is how I heard it. And it got back in my head. But I also found the little definition that I put in the artwork, which was, something that comes down, hard and final, as in a cat's paw, so I kind of thought of it more like, being crushed by life or something.
Right.
And, I love cats in general. So just having a way to put cat in anything was cool. But I've watched, dumb things and great things. I watched, every episode of Friends, which I'd never seen.
I've never watched it, which is a Gen Xer. I don't know how I didn't do that, but I never watched it.
I really didn't watch TV all during the 90s or even into the new millennium. It's funny. It was Susanna Hoffs who kind of got me to start watching stuff. She was like, you've got to get, these channels and all this stuff. And she sort of gifted me like HBO and all these things. And then I got into watching, so I've watched, a million movies and just, I'm constantly consuming.
Right. Well, there's so much to unpack there, but I will say I just watched the Sparks documentary.
Oh, that sounds great.
You would love it. And I think it's on HBO. So check that out. And
that's great. Yeah. So, I haven't seen that.
That'll be one. And then from an HBO standpoint, David Simon is such a great writer. And everybody talks about The Wire, and The Wire is great, but I really love Treme because it's all about New Orleans after Katrina.
Yeah. I need to watch that show.
So, well, you and I have a shared history. In fact, I was laughing because today somebody was on Twitter talking about who's the most famous person from your high school. And it's going to be either you, Matthew, or Alex Gordon. I guess if you're a sports person, it's Alex Gordon, who played for the Royals for, 15 seasons and, they won the World Series. He was Lincoln Southeast, but you would probably be the other one. So it's just kind of interesting. I love growing up in Lincoln. I felt like it was a great place to grow up. And some of my closest and dearest friends are from Lincoln. I'm still in touch with them now. What was it like for you?
I agree. It was the same. I thought it was a great place to grow up. It wasn't, so big that it had real big city problems. So you could kind of, even as a kid, get around and do, I would take the bus downtown, and I could do stuff on my own even when I was pretty young. And there were, lots of people who were musicians because it was a college town, and there was, a great record store with dirt cheap. And so I really liked growing up in Lincoln. And it's funny, when I first went away, I went to Georgia and went to college for a couple of years at U of A in Athens, Georgia. And it was like I lived there, and then I lived in New York for a few years, and people didn't even know like what Nebraska was. They were they were like, it was like being from some faraway mythical land or something.
Yeah, they ask if there's still Indians
funny.
there, right?
It's funny because so often I'll see references to Nebraska and Lincoln just in movies and TV shows and things. So I guess a lot of people from here must have made it out to LA and gotten into writing, because I see it pretty often. But yeah, I loved Lincoln. I didn't leave there because I didn't like it. I just was more, curious and ready to go live on my own. And I'd kind of met the guys from REM, and they had hooked me up with Mitch Easter from North Carolina, I was kind of pen pals with when I was still in high school. And people from Athens kind of encouraged me to go there. Mitch said I'd go to Athens or Boston, and Athens just sounded easier, because it was a small town.
Kind of another college town like Lincoln, I'm guessing, is part of
Yeah, exactly. In another college town, and not that different in a way. I mean, Athens was smaller, but at least at that time, I'm sure it's much bigger now. But yeah, love Lincoln, have fond memories of it. In my older years, I kind of felt like I couldn't remember like when I was really young very well. And everybody always remembered things better than I did, when I would see friends or meet people even that I didn't know who grew up there. And once I moved back to Omaha, which is about, I think, 7 years ago now, it slowly started to kind of come back to me. And I feel like I've kind of reconnected with my feelings about Lincoln and growing up there, and the early times of getting into music in my life, so it's been really cool to be back here for that reason. And the location, even though I grew up in Lincoln, and, probably I would prefer to live in Lincoln. My sister lives there with her family and some of my nieces and stuff, but Omaha just made more sense for being able to use this as a touring base and get out and do what I was already doing. So it didn't really change my music life that much to move here, because the internet, and I just kind of felt like I could go anywhere. So when we decided to leave LA, we thought of, a million places. Like we were like, let's go to Hawaii, let's go to way northern California on the water or whatever. But it was like everywhere we knew no one, and it was hard to like get to airports and stuff. So eventually, I don't know how it came up, but we thought, what if we went to Nebraska? And my brother is in Des Moines, and like I said, my sister's in Lincoln, and my parents were both still alive and in Lincoln when we came back here. They've both passed since I moved here, but it was great to reconnect with my family. It's really cool to be closer to my brother and sister. We're all really good friends. We don't have like weird dynamics sort of in our family.
That's
and
great.
So and they all have a million kids, so there's lots of nieces and nephews and family around, which I really like.
No, it's great. My sister who's in Omaha, she lives at like 144th and Center. She's one of my closest friends.
I know it well.
I bet you do. So did Matthew, when you came back, was your wife, how much did your wife know about Nebraska? Or was she...
Well, she knew a lot because she grew up in Scottsbluff.
Well, that's Randy
I mean,
Meisner territory now. We're really
getting
all the
exactly.
Nebraska, right?
Yeah, totally. And yes, she knew who he was. And he was very well known in Scottsbluff. And so we grew up on opposite ends of the state, but we met in New York. And then, when I had split up with my first wife, I got married really, really young. I was back here. I had met her in New York through my brother's wife's family. And I came back to visit in Lincoln, and I went over to my brother's one night, and she was there babysitting one of my nieces who's, in her 30s now or whatever.
Right.
And it was just like this weird connection. And because we were both from Nebraska, we just had this connection of kind of seeing things the same way and having kind of the same attitude. She was kind of practical in a way like I was, and grounded in a way that I think of as Midwestern and Nebraskan. So she also has relatives all the way here in Omaha and in Lincoln, and one of her sisters moved to Omaha last spring. And in fact, we have her, our niece, her daughter is 18, and she's been living at our house. So we kind of, since we don't have any kids, we're kind of getting to pretend to be sort of parents, here with her. And so that's kind of cool, No, so yeah, Lisa, cool. My wife, knew Nebraska well.
Well, that's great. And I've been here, like I said, since 94, but we were out, my wife's a Kansas City native, so kind of close. And as you know, Kansas City to Lincoln is an easy 3-hour drive. So
I went down there as a teenager to see, Squeeze and the Pretenders, and some really great things I got to see down there.
Yeah. And then we were out in Phoenix for a while, but we moved back. And kind of to your earlier point, my father, who was a jazz musician, and he actually taught at the university.
Oh, that's so cool.
He got sick and died. We came back in May of 2000. My dad died in October of 2000. And I'm sure it's the same for you. I cannot put enough value the fact that I got to spend that much time with him by coming back to the Midwest.
It's really important. I was so glad I got to spend that time with my parents. My mom passed away pretty quickly. I mean, about a year after we moved back here. My dad was, a few years longer. But yeah, just to be able to see them, it was kind of like they were freaked out that we moved to Nebraska. They were like, "What's wrong?"
Right.
But it was great to see them and be around them. And I cannot imagine not having been here for that. I think it must be so disorienting for people who can't be around really for that part of life, because it's an important thing. And I just think it would have been so much weirder and kind of affected me worse, had I not been around.
Yeah. And I think when you get to about your 30s, you start to kind of, I don't know if it's calmed down, but I think you just have a greater appreciation that every generation kind of goes through the same thing, right? That nobody has it figured out, and that it's been hard, and your parents are people. I know that seems stupid to say that out loud, but it does. I mean, I felt like, and now my mother, who, was still with us, and actually in the house we grew up in Lincoln, she's 89. She's one of my closest and dearest friends. Wow. So that's just great. Yeah.
And that was how it was with my parents, toward the end. Like any weirdnesses, it's like I grew up and I think we had a great childhood. There were issues. I suffer from bipolar disorder, although I've been treated for 20 years. And I think my mom was quite bipolar, but never treated.
Mm-hmm.
And, there was we kind of butted heads, and there was, a sort of awkwardness between us. And it took me kind of a long time to come to terms with it. But like you said, like toward the end, we got along great and there was no weirdness. And that helped a lot. And since she's been gone, I just only remember fondness, none of the weirdness at all kind of hangs around for me. I have dreams where I see my parents, where they're there, where I talk to them, and they're never nightmares. It's always something kind of positive.
No, I agree. And then we're going to talk about music, but I think it's, you and I are pretty close in age. And as you get older and you just kind of, right after my dad died, I actually had you have those dreams that are so vivid, like you think they're real. At the time. And he came into our bedroom of the house I lived in at the time here in Kansas City. And he said, "It's okay. I'm all right. And I'm in a better place. It's good, lead your life," kind of thing. And it was one of those things that it just startles when you wake up. It felt like he was really in the room. And,
I've had that. Yeah.
Right. So, well, I feel that Gen Xers, I know we kind of get shit on, Matthew, because, we're between the baby boomers and the millennials and stuff.
Well, I mean, I'm 64, so it's actually considered.
You're right.
It's right on the cusp, kind of,
But I think we have the cool. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think maybe I'm baby boomer.
Well, you're right on the edge, right?
Yeah.
So if you were born, what year would you have been born? 64?
64 in October.
Yeah. So you're right on that edge. But I was thinking at least for us, I felt like we got the best because we got all that great music when we were kids, right? Not only just the Beatles, which everybody talks about, but there's so much great music. And then the 70s had a lot of great music, and then our generation stuff. And then right now, so I'm guessing you probably feel the same. It was a great time to love music and appreciate music and take it all in.
Totally great. And the funny thing about it, when I look back is, even in the mid to late 70s, as I was 10, 12, 13, 14, the Beatles and things from the 60s just seemed like ancient history to me.
Right.
And it's so mind-blowing how short that time had been, how much happened in such a short period of time in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And it's very different now because the internet kind of blew everything up. But life was different then, and it was kind of more exciting to be into music. It was one of the things you could do, and it was your private world. You could close your bedroom door and, get lost in records. They were big and interesting kind of to look at,
Yep, absolutely.
And it's hard to explain kind of to people who are younger what it was like to not be able to find out every little thing about stuff you loved. You had to either run into someone who knew more than you, or, whatever you could find in some kind of publication was about it, So I think it was an exciting time to get into music, and just such an early explosion of stuff. And really, as I got older, the more I loved, the 60s and the Beatles, and I loved a lot of 70s stuff. I grew up, more in the 70s.
Right.
So, I was 10 in 1974. So it was by that time, I was unfortunate in that nobody was really a musician in my family. I didn't have, my parents didn't have all these incredible records and know the history of any music. So I kind of went backwards. Like I learned current stuff as I was growing up. And then as I got a little older, I went back and back and back, and eventually learned about, the 50s and how
Mm-hmm.
rock and roll started. And that's just so cool. Your dad was a jazz guy. The late Robert Quine, who played on a bunch of my records early on, turned me on to a lot of music. And he really, he was quite a bit older than me. And he was the one who kind of got me into Sun Records and a lot of those, Roy Orbison and all these kind
Mm-hmm.
of 50s people. But the greatest thing is he turned me on to Bill Evans,
Oh yeah.
and I just love Bill Evans so much. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of my jazz thing is him, and I still play all his records, all the time.
Yeah. My dad was 40 years older than me. So it was almost two generations, right?
Wow.
Because he graduated from high school in 1946. So he was
Wow.
just like Harry James was his hero. Harry James, Count Basie, Duke
So
Ellington,
cool.
Art Blakey. And the cool thing is I have all of his albums. And I never threw my albums out. So down in my basement, it's like that's what I love to do. It's just
Wow.
been a long week and put on a great album and sit
That's
back and
really
have a
cool.
cocktail.
Yeah.
And
It's one of the cool things about now is the kind of appreciation for vinyl. When I started out in the 80s, when I first got a record deal, I guess I was 20 or 21. And it was like, if you were really successful, you could do they'd put out a CD. But if you were just kind of starting out, they would just do vinyl.
Mhm.
And then, shortly thereafter, if you were, you would get a CD, but you wouldn't get vinyl unless you were really successful. And for a long time, just nobody at labels cared too much about vinyl because it was sort of gone. And that's one of the great things now is we always get to make vinyl, no matter how kind of indie the stuff we put out is, because it has its niche that's really strong. And I go to, when I'm touring, I've been to a lot of record stores, and we'll do little in stores and play in them sometimes. In fact, there's one in Kansas City. They're so great, and I'm spacing the name, and I know the guy that runs it.
Yeah, there's a
And
bunch of them
I
now. There's like a
was
million
I
of
was
them.
down there, and he had a letter that I wrote to him when I was in high school, with a reel-to-reel tape of a group I was in called the Specs, who were really, everybody was in college but me. I was like 13 and I played bass with them, and they were all, in college and partying. And I guess I sent, we made a recording, and I sent it to this guy, and it was it was so funny. It was like, I know we're totally shit. And, it was
Yeah.
like I was putting us down, in the letter. Please listen to this tape now that I told you it's terrible. But we did get a song on the KFMQ
Oh yeah.
uh, Homegrown album one year. And that was kind of the first song I wrote that ever got on uh, got on a record. But there was a lot of stuff out of Kansas City I loved. Um, uh, I'm now again spacing the name of the label, but that's who I sent the letter to.
Okay.
And they had the Boys. Do you know the
Oh
Boys?
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
And I just loved them. Like, when I turned 13, I my friends snuck me into the Drumstick, the great club in Lincoln,
Yeah, I was
and
gonna.
they were so amazing. They were like
Mm-mm.
Cheap Trick or something, and I really dug them, and I knew they had a record out of Kansas City, so I
Yeah, it's
have that connection
so
too.
did you know that the Drumstick they did a documentary about it?
I did not know that.
Yeah, it just came out. So I'll send you the link to your manager. You can check it out. But I went to high school and junior high school actually with the Can brothers, and their mom owned the Drumstick. So
Ah,
so
cool. Yeah.
Jeff and Dennis Can, they would come like and they go like, oh, we got to see Joan Jett last night, and I'm like
Yeah.
13 at Pound Junior High, and I'm like, you have the coolest mom on the planet.
Yeah. And there were some great artists that came through there. And, that's how I met REM. I went to see them because I had a 45 that I read about in their first 45 they made themselves. I read about in New York Rocker, this kind of newsprint rock magazine from New York that I got at Cheap Trick. I'm sorry, Dirt Cheap. I mean to say, I just said Cheap Trick before. And I went to see them, and there were like 80 people there or something. It was such an incredible experience. And they're like, wow, this kid in Nebraska has our 45, And I used to see so many great people there. Joe King Carrasco.
Oh my God, yes.
And like I would drive them to like McDonald's and stuff,
yeah,
kind of help people out. And so yeah, we had some great times there.
Yeah, the documentary's cool. I'll send the link and check it out. You'll enjoy it. And, it's so inside baseball. But for people like us, it's like, it's like a total, like, mind trip. It's like taking you back.
Yeah.
I got the T-shirt, too, because I was like, I got to get the T-shirt. Because
that's cool. Wow.
Yeah. It's called Remember the Drumstick is the name of the documentary.
Okay. So. Where do you find it? It's
on the internet, Matthew. You know, everything's on the interweb. So somebody sent me the link to watch it. So, but I'll find, they're doing stuff there for it too, but I'll get it to you. It won't be hard, since I know so many people still on LinkedIn. It'll be easy. I'll send it to him and he can send it on to you, and let me know what you think of it. But it's a lot of fun. Well, I could talk to you all forever, but I want to be cognizant of your time. But one thing I want to talk, when you were talking about love of music and you brought up Susanna a little bit, I think it's so cool what you guys did for 3 different decades, and just that picking the songs that you love to play, I'm guessing, is what was your process for like, this is the songs we want to do?
Well, we knew each other a little bit from way back. Somehow my friend Fred Marr knew her back, even, I think it was before Girlfriend, and before we made it. And so I would have been living in New York. And I remember one day he put me on the phone with her. And of course I dug the Bangles, and I had their early records. I really liked girl groups in general. I loved the Go-Go's, and going back in time, like the Shangri-Las are probably my favorite. But anyhow, I spoke to her on the phone at some point. I can't remember why he put me on the phone with her. And then when I moved to Los Angeles, she brought Mike Myers to an early Girlfriend show at this place, McCabe's. And she and her husband, Jay, who at the time was a film teacher at UCLA,
right?
They were good friends with Mike and his then wife, Robin. And so we all started hanging out after that. And that's how I got to know her better, through Austin's band, the Ming T.
Mm-hmm.
And so we knew each other from that. And then at some point in the mid, what do you call the first decade?
The aughts, I guess.
The aughts, yeah, mid-aughts.
Yeah.
The Bangles asked me to go and do a song or two at a thing that was back at McCabe's, that same place we met. And it was like Bangles and Friends. And so I went to do that. And when we were backstage afterwards, I saw Susanna. We hadn't seen each other in a little while, since I guess the third Austin Powers movie. And I said, I'd love to do something sometime with you. I really love your voice.
Mm-hmm.
And really my idea was we would write songs, and it would be her. The idea wasn't, my idea wasn't for me to be with her, or singing. But she had a relationship with a guy named Sean Amos. He's actually Famous Amos's son.
Okay.
And he worked at this place called Shout Factory, who now, they're probably mostly known as they reissue tons of video. They came out of sort of Rhino Records land people. And they were already talking to Sue, and they said, why don't you guys do a covers record? And even though that wasn't sort of what I had in mind, just to do anything together, we were excited about. So we were like, sure, we'll make a covers record. So that's how the first one came together. And it was a great time for me, hanging with Sue and getting to know her. It's kind of like a sister to me a little bit. We're not in as much touch now that I don't live there, but we are enough that, we are planning to do a 90s volume at some point. So we made the process was like we would each make a list, or even certain days we'd call each other and go, what about this song or what about that song? But what was amazing in the beginning even is when we compared lists, we had just a ton of the same things, even if they were, not as well-known stuff like, the Left Bank and certain things that were on that. So it was almost kind of magical. Like, how do we like all the same stuff? But we just really liked a lot of the same stuff. And then it kind of expanded into, if we would hear something that we thought was kind of challenging, like, whoa, what if we covered this song? That just because it just was, we were curious to see if we could kind of pull it off, And so that was a lot of fun. And all of our lists, all the decades, we, at least probably 70% of our lists already matched when we didn't even talk about it. Even with, even we've done some back and forth about the 90s and we pick all the same things, so it's pretty crazy.
So go ahead, Matthew.
No, it's okay. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so the 90s is such a crazy decade musically, right? Because, everybody thinks of grunge, and obviously that was a big part of it. But you and I offline talked a little bit about Jellyfish, and then, there's those types of bands.
Yeah, some great power pop bands.
Right. So there's all that part of it, too. And there's some great, women acts that came out in the 90s. There's a lot of great stuff. So, you don't have to give it away and ruin the surprise, but is there a kind of genre that you guys are looking at, or what's kind of speaking to you from that decade?
Not exactly. It's sort of wide ranging, and I'd kind of have to look to tell you what things exactly, but all the groups you would think that we would like. We both came up with There She Goes, that song by The Lost.
Yeah.
But a wide variety of things. And I think what I was going to say, my last comment on the process, is that we made that first record, and then we found out they put volume 1 on the artwork. And we were like, volume 1? Like, are we going to do another one? It's like we didn't even know that was going to happen exactly. So it's kind of amazing it became the different decades volumes, and kind of over time we got sort of worse and worse about taking forever to make them. And we both had a lot of other things we were doing,
right? And
it was sort of like Shout Factory got more and more kind of angry at us for not turning in the records quickly enough. Like, for instance, we were planning on making the 70s a quote double album unquote. We recorded almost 40 songs for it, and at some point they're like, take what you have done and we're making a single CD. So someday we'll release some of it's seen the light of day, but there's quite a few things that never came out from it. And Susanna in particular is always saying, we got to get those songs and get them out somehow.
That's so great. And the only thing I'll add, and then I'll have a final question to wrap up. But so I had Jason Faulkner on, and I've loved Jason for a long time and his music and stuff. But I told him, I was laughing because you're a high school boy. that Susanna was like this huge crush of mine. I was just in love with Susanna, and he laughed and
Yeah,
said,
she was great. I mean,
right?
everybody was.
That's
Yeah.
what he did. He laughed and he said everybody was in love with
Yeah,
Susanna, right?
totally. She had that, look to the side thing.
Oh my gosh, yes. I can still see the video. So
And she has such a great sense of humor. And gosh, we've had a lot of fun together.
yeah, and he did her first solo album, and he talked glowingly about how great she was and how sweet she is and how wonderful she is to work with. So I'm not surprised to hear it from you too, but it's awfully nice, right, to hear those things about people.
Yeah, totally. I mean, just people are, in awe of her, and everybody remembers her really well. And yeah, they're still in love with her. And I mean, she also, it's like she's barely aged. She hasn't,
Yeah, which is annoying though. That's my one thing against
it's
her.
very annoying. But she's like always been in great shape, and she looks great, and not that that matters, but it helps with all the fans who still love her, when they get to see, wow, she's kind of still who I loved.
Right. Well, I could talk to you all day. We could talk about For Against, and we could talk about the Millions.
Oh, For Against, that's
right?
my buddy Jeff Runnings. Yeah,
all these Lincoln
we've connected
bands.
a little bit here in Omaha. You know what else I wanted to ask you is if you know Lindy Nickerson.
Why does that name sound familiar?
She's sort of involved with bands a lot in Kansas City.
Okay, yeah.
She's married to somebody in Kansas City and has lived there. And she was like my last high school girlfriend.
Okay.
And we were really, really tight. And then when I moved away to Athens, I sort of dropped the ball on our thing, and I always have kind of felt badly about it. And so many people in over the years bring her up to me because somehow she's been really involved with bands and stuff in Kansas City. So I just thought maybe you'd know her.
I don't, but now I'm going to have to look her up, Matthew.
Lindy Nickerson.
I bet you. I'm looking on Facebook. We probably have we have 3 mutual friends.
I'm sure she is on there.
Yep. So I will have to shout out and say, hey, because it's she's another Southeast Knight. She
cool. Was like such a cool person, and her dad was actually a teacher at I think at Southeast.
Okay.
And
Mr. Nickerson.
Yeah. I loved their family, and I'd hang out a lot over there. So
that's great.
Shout out to her.
So for you, what's 20? I know you want to tour later in the year. It's got to seem weird. You put out a great album. I read the reviews. The reviews were fabulous, which has to make you feel good.
That was cool. The response, I really, it's funny because I just really didn't know even what I thought about Catspaw when I finished it. And so it was really wonderful, the reaction it got, and super nice reviews. I did a ton of promo for it. Omnivore really stepped up, for that. So I can only speak very, very highly of them. But, I do want to make more music. I kind of thought this year I would have been already writing and recording, but somehow I haven't quite gotten to it. But it's building up. That's how it kind of works with me. Like the feeling sort of builds up, and then suddenly I'll do a ton of stuff and make an album. So I'm sure I will do it for sure during 2022. And albums don't do that much for us, at this age anymore, and who we are that are from, old rockers from the past,
right.
But for me, I never have gotten sick of doing music, and that's what I love to do, is record and write songs. So I'll keep trying to do that. And, touring has stayed amazingly pretty good for me over the years. So maybe it's good to get a couple years off and kind of, build back up, and it'll be kind of fresh for everybody.
Yeah. I saw one of your reviews and somebody said that, you know, that it was like you were like a warm blanket, that just that reminder and stuff. And I always feel that way when you put something out. It's such a thing, because I actually worked at the college radio station. So when Girlfriend came out, it was such a big deal. I was at KRNU. So I just that it's just that visceral, you know, we don't know each other per se, but hearing you sing and writing song, it's just a pleasant thing for me. I'm
Oh,
always like,
that's great. Thank you so much. Well, college radio was so important. And I remember I followed, in the very back of Rolling Stone, they would have the college charts. And that's where things I loved, at that time, but right before I was graduating in 1983, REM and a lot of things I loved, Robin Hitchcock and people, that's the chart, that they went up. And so it was a huge deal for me when I got on college radio, and they worked really hard. And I have, framed things of the chart magazines that, the people who worked so hard to make it happen at Zoo, gave to me back then. I'm not really a hang up the gold records kind of person. They're just in a stack in, one of my rooms, but I have some very cool reminders of how cool it was to get up on that chart on CMJ.
Yeah, it just felt like it was like your own little secret club of coolness, right? I mean,
very
everybody talks about,
and we went to so many college radio stations too.
I bet you did. Yeah, because like Nirvana, I didn't hear, but the rest of the world heard Nirvana on MTV, but I actually heard their album before that because of college radio. I mean, that's like
that's awesome.
Example.
Yeah. My first A&R guy gave me early Nirvana stuff that really was quite different, not as poppy as when the big album happened. Butch Vig made them commercial on that record, and oh my God, what a force Kurt was, and his voice was so amazing. I remember hearing them when I would be out on the road and driving to radio stations with the promo people, and they would generally play the radio station we were headed to. Right. And so they started to just be on there all the time. And I was so jealous of like his voice, like that could rip up like that, but sound so appealing. And my voice is just really different. It doesn't really break up. It's a little more of the choir boy, Beach Boys kind of voice or something. Yeah,
I love your voice for what it's worth.
It was a great time. And I just can't even believe now, looking back, how long it's been, also that it ever happened. It was just so, because I never thought I would have the kind of success I had. I just wanted to make records and record and do recording in studios and have music friends, and I should have worried about it more, because you make a few albums that don't do anything, and then it'll be harder to keep making them, but I was really lucky what happened with Girlfriend, and it changed my life.
And it's 30 years this year, right?
It's 30 years. I didn't even know. And it was funny because when I started doing the interviews in January for Catspaw, people were like, wow, it's 30 years. How do you feel? And I was like, it is?
Right. It just
I remember 25. By. I remember 25 or maybe just 20, because we went out and toured playing the whole album. And we did that for like 3 or 4 years or something, because there was just so much demand for it, So I kind of got the anniversary thing out of my system then. So it was a little bit of a surprise to be at another one.
No, it just flies by. It's just, I had that on cassette, Matthew. That's how long ago it was, right?
Oh yeah. I've got a lot of cassettes. A good friend of mine from high school sent us a shoebox full of early demos and things that I gave him. And, we are going to try to start releasing lots of things that people have never heard. It's kind of time to start doing that. I'm supposed to get out all my DAT tapes and start archiving what exists, so my management can help me curate it and put some things out. And it's great because like my manager, one of my manager's sons that was a baby back then,
Right.
now also works at the management company, and he's kind of taken on helping me do a lot of stuff. That's Adrian, probably you've been dealing
Yeah,
with.
Adrian's been really nice. Thank you for
Yeah,
that.
he's a great guy and really smart, and he's been very dedicated to helping do stuff because I'm a little bit, I don't, I'm not dying to listen to myself all the time, and it kind of freaks me out. But when I do hear old things, usually I just have good feeling about it.
Yeah. Well, I will let you go. I do let every artist pick the song for the intro and the outro when I introduce and then talk about it. So it's 100% up to you. I've been getting in trouble. Some people are like, you're asking me to pick my children, like my favorite. It's like, no, I just
Yeah,
want
that's what
right.
I would say. I would say pick whatever you want because you
Okay.
probably have a really good sense for it.
Well, I'm going to do one of each. I'm going to do one off the new album because I think it's always important to talk about what people are doing today. And I really like the song "Drifting," if that's okay. I think
Oh,
it's
that's yeah, totally cool. I love the feeling of that.
yeah, and it kind of fits perfectly right now.
Yeah, yeah.
So why don't we bookend it? We'll do that for the first one, and then obviously Girlfriend's a great. I loved everything on Girlfriend, but I've been waiting. It just the first time I heard that, it kind
Uh
of had that like that Birds kind of feeling to it, right?
yeah, no, I love that. And it was like the Birds. And it's funny because I knew the Birds and I liked the Birds, but it's funny having brought up Robert Quine earlier, he
Mm-hmm.
was really into the Birds. And I knew him more from Richard Hell and the Voidoids and Lou Reed and stuff. And my friend Fred was like, he's really great at like jangly. He loves the Birds. And Bob would come into the studio when we were making Girlfriend and play. We'd go in one of the other rooms and play Birds records on the monitors. And so it definitely had that. It's also a really special song for me because I wrote it when I fell in love with my second wife, who is my current wife. And it was purely out of just a feeling of infatuation. I woke up one morning and I wrote it and I recorded it. And I just had this new friend and I was really happy about it. And so she's really the girlfriend from Girlfriend, and we're still together. We're getting up on, I'm trying to think, 27, 28 years together, married. So
That's
more
great.
speak of the flying time
Mm-hmm.
and the anniversaries of things. That turned out to be a very prophetic song.
That's so sweet. I love that. And I've been married to my wife's my best friend. We've been together. We've been married since 1998 and we've been together since 94. And I totally get that vibe. So hearing the backstory on that makes me love the song even more, which I didn't
Oh,
think was
that's great.
possible.
Well, it's very purely an inspired moment song.
That's great. Well, you take care of yourself, Matthew. Like I said, it's a total treat for me. Obviously, since we had shared background and shared high school and stuff, it's nice that I loved your music too.
Oh, thank you so much.
So when you come to Kansas City, the world opens up and you play. I would love to say hello and just say hi to you.
Please
And
do come on
okay,
down. We play pretty frequently at what's the place with the kind
record
of out
bar. Where do you
out
play?
outdoor
Oh,
stage?
well, you play at Knuckleheads probably.
Knuckleheads.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, Knucklehead. I often will kind of joke about the name. I'll come out and say, how's everybody doing, you knuckleheads?
It's such a crazy venue, isn't it?
Yes, they're really nice people though, and they take great care of us, and we generally have really good crowds there. And Kansas City was never really a place I played a lot, in the past, but in more recent years, we've gone there almost every tour.
That's great. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing that and seeing you in person. It's really made my week. I really appreciate it. I will send your manager the link when it goes live, and I'll also send remember the Drumstick information, so you can watch
Oh,
yet another documentary since it's going to get cold soon and we can't get out.
I
soon,
know.
right?
I'm getting ready. I'm getting ready for it. But
Nobody lives in Nebraska.
That's one of the things I love actually about being back is having definite seasons again. You know, because the spring and the fall are so wonderful here, and I like the winter. The summers have gotten a little too global warming brutal for my taste, but they don't last as long into the fall as they did in California. So I guess we're always going to get a new season every 3 months, you know?
Absolutely. Well, Matthew, you take care. Like I said, I really enjoyed it and love the new album.
Thanks so much. Gosh, we could, I'm sure we could go on forever about old Southeast.
I'll tell you what, let's make a deal here. When you're done with the new album,
okay,
reach back out and we'll talk about it, and we can delve more into, we can talk about, were you a band nerd at Southeast like I was? I don't know, but I was, we can do all that. So it'd be great.
Okay, we'll do it.
All right, Matthew, have a great weekend too.
You